Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the Cover 2 podcast. I'm Jared Smith.
And I'm Nenad.
And today's show, we have some interesting, very much debatable topics to get into.
Yes.
A little bit later on, we're going to talk about MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred, his latest comments on the Astros cheating scandal and some particular comments that have many people, including Nick here, our resident baseball fan, fired up and very angry, especially coming from a commissioner's mouth, something that should never be said. But we're actually going to begin today's show with the NFL, and the all 32 league owners agreed to a new collective bargaining agreement, which could take place as soon as this upcoming season, which means more money for owners, more money for players, and I think the biggest thing would be no strike.
Yep.
So after this 2020 season, there will be at least 10 more seasons of playing without any hiccups or any major implications. If for some reason there is not a deal made, we could potentially see a strike after the 2020 season, and who knows how long that could go for. The one thing I do know is that no one wants to miss out on football games. Fans, players, owners, everyone I think can agree on that. And so there has been a huge emphasis in the last week or so for players and owners to come together and get a deal done. So the owners have agreed to a deal. The players, the ball is now in their court. The players are now coming together to go over the proposed terms and basically vote to see if they want to pass this and like I said, continue football for the next 10 years without any hiccups. So that's where we're going to get started today.
Yeah.
We both have some of the terms listed here as far as what the new regulations will be for the NFL. Some interesting things that kind of caught my eye really quickly, Nick, and I just want to kind of get your immediate thoughts on this. So one of the proposed new terms would be an elimination of any game suspensions strictly for positive marijuana tests. Now we know that has been a huge issue for players and owners. Many players in the NFL do smoke marijuana. They are open about it. It's not something that is hidden. We know that Greg Robinson, the tackle for the Browns, just yesterday got pulled over and was found with 157 pounds of marijuana in his car. Yes, you heard me correctly. 157
That's
pounds.
just a bit illegal. Just a bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
So, it's no secret that NFL players smoke weed.
Yeah, not that much.
Not that much.
Yeah.
But one of the new terms is that if a player is caught smoking weed or in a random drug test, they will not be suspended games. They will still be able to play. They will still be able to get a paycheck. So, Nick, just quick thoughts on one of these first key terms here.
Yeah. I mean, this is. I think we've established now that marijuana isn't this horrendous thing, and that it does help people, and that it doesn't really affect performance on the field necessarily in sports. We can get into the political, all that stuff, and we have debates going on every single day, essentially about marijuana and other topics. But sports-wise, marijuana doesn't really affect your performance on the field like, say, a steroid would or other more hardcore drugs. So, most sports have sort of, they've leaned away.
Become more lenient.
Yeah, become more lenient on the suspensions and the punishment for this, because they're realizing that it does help players. Players don't have to do steroids. Players don't have to get too addicted to pain pills and stuff like that in order to get better. So overall, it's a good thing. And it's smart for them to put in there, because I think if they would have had some hardcore stance on it, I think it would have been hard for the players to approve of this. So it's definitely a good thing. And overall, we see in the United States, it's kind of, people are getting a little bit more lenient with marijuana and understanding the positive effects of it besides the negative effects. Now, you don't want 157 pounds in your car. Like Greg Robinson.
I still just can't even imagine 157
I
pounds of
physically
marijuana.
don't understand, unless you have a semi-truck, how you could have that much marijuana in a vehicle. But I guess Greg Robinson realized he's probably not going to get a contract for the NFL, so we need to start a new job.
The dude could potentially be facing up to 20 years in prison.
Yeah, that's
right?
not good.
No?
That's a lot of time.
Wow.
And you will not be able to play in the NFL. NFL CBA does not cannot see you out of prison.
Yeah, you can't back that. I mean, there's there's no testing or there's really no answer for that, man. I don't know where he was going with that. If he was trying to sell it and make a big score, I mean,
you definitely could make a lot of money with that much marijuana, but like, whew,
you're an NFL player. You've already got millions of dollars. What do you need to go sell 157 pounds for?
Like I said, I don't know if he knows the way he's performed the last couple of years in the NFL. I don't know if he knows.
Maybe he wasn't like his long-term future in the NFL was looking pretty bleak, and he was trying to get his other business
going.
going.
There is the XFL though, so you could have, you never know. It's a big mistake. It's a stupid mistake. By Greg Robinson.
Let's continue with a little bit more of the terms just to get people up to speed on maybe what these...
Yeah, and remember, none of this has happened yet.
Right.
The players still have to vote. We had at least 75% vote from the owners, which is all they needed. That has passed. So we are, at least you could say, 50% through the negotiations as we are recording today. When this is released tomorrow, Friday morning, potentially, once the day comes to an end, we could actually have an agreement.
Right.
We're just going over the terms just to discuss if we think they're a good idea. If they end up not being accepted, well then, it doesn't really matter. But for now, this is important.
And I do want to say that it's a little interesting that, this has been something that's been discussed in the media and news outlets for months now, obviously coming up, right? And I think, like I mentioned in the beginning, owners and players want to get a deal done. I don't think either side wants a strike, right? Because in that case,
no money,
both sides are losing money, right? And that we don't want that to happen. But it's interesting that it seems like the owners have approved this in a much quicker manner than normal. And so it's interesting, J.J. Watt, one of the most prevalent and well-known NFL players and stars and faces of the NFL, came out and he tweeted, he said, hard no on that proposed CBA. And so when you have stars of that caliber coming out and emphatically saying no to that CBA, I'm curious as to what's the hidden language in there, right? Why are the owners so adamant on getting this deal done? Players up to this point have, in a sense, been screwed by the CBA, and people will sit here and say, wait, Jared, like, they make millions of dollars, what are you talking about? They do, but owners are billionaires, and the owners are the ones who get the majority of the money that is fed into the NFL. One of the other terms that players are looking to gain an advantage in is in the gambling aspect, with the NFL now partnering with gambling companies and more revenue coming in from that. Players want a piece of that action, right? Obviously, the players are the ones that people are gambling on, so they figure, hey, if you're going to gamble on me, I want to get paid for that, right? Sure. So little things like that players want to be able to say, hey, I want to put my foot in here. I want to diversify my portfolio, whatever the case may be. So I'm just curious as to what the NFL owners have up their sleeve, because like I said, it just seems like it's all of a sudden there was really no talk about this in the last couple of weeks, and then bam, this week the owners have approved it, right? So
well, it's interesting because like I'm looking at this, I'm on NFL.com right now, and I'm waiting for this guy to bring up the extra terms just for reference, but the whole 17, because what we haven't mentioned is that we're potentially going to have one more full regular season game, which is insane. We could potentially have 14 playoff teams next year, which is insane.
Right, as opposed to 12 in previous years.
Only one team getting a bye, which is crazy. Like, these are big deals. It's kind of just snuck into this deal. Like, it just kind of is put in there like it's just normal language.
We see all of that seems to be on the surface. Yeah. I'm curious as to what is below the surface. Like, are the players, what's the amount of money that the players are going to be getting paid? Are they going to be getting paid during bye weeks? And if you do receive that first round bye, if you were the top seed in your conference, do you still get paid for that off week? Like, the little things, the small language that many outsiders don't see, right? Is the NFL and the owners specifically, are they trying to maneuver their way in and like I said again, continue to screw the players out of money for the owners' financial gain?
Well, one of those things could be, we always talk about player safety, right? It's a big talk really with any NFL new rules. How is it going to make the NFL safer? Now, there's obviously rules that don't have anything to do with players being safe, but making there be one more regular season game, that's way more intense than the proposed elimination of one preseason game. Excuse me. What we're probably going to see from here on out is, 2 preseason games where the starters are playing and the one where the starters don't. So these players are going to be playing on the field less than they already were in kind of a game scenario. We've seen a lot of times at the beginning of the year, players get injured more because they're not properly prepared. And one thing in this CBA agreement is the training camp hours are being cut down. So not only are players going to have to play more intense games, realistically, with the added playoff game for two teams now, one from the AFC and one from the NFC, but also the added regular season game without a second bye week, one less preseason game. I think that could be one gripe. That's at least one gripe I would have as a player, is saying, okay, well, why not just keep the preseason the same so we can properly train and get ready, or keep the training camp the same?
Right.
It's that's at least one thing I saw.
I think from the owner's perspective, they will actually come to the table and say this, and this is something that has become a little more prevalent in the last few years, and specifically last year during the preseason, I remember a handful of teams, the Green Bay Packers, the Chicago Bears, just to name two, they didn't play any of their key starters, as in like their starting quarterback. Like Aaron Rodgers didn't play at all in the preseason. Now, we obviously know that Aaron Rodgers is a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and yes, you need reps, but he doesn't really need to go out there in the preseason. For the Chicago Bears, Mitchell Trubisky and none of their starters played a single down in the preseason. And then all of a sudden, they were forced into action in week one and prepared to play as if they had been playing for weeks before. So I think the owners are coming to the table and saying, hey, if your starters aren't playing in the preseason, then what's the point?
Yeah.
And why don't we just reduce, So
that's a good point. That's a very good point.
And I remember that specifically last year,
like,
as obviously following the Cowboys, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, many of their starters, they only played in the third game, which many people call the tune-up game, but still, they didn't play a whole lot. It was an unusual preseason where many starters didn't play at all. They'll usually play in one game or at least a half of a game, and for some NFL teams, starters didn't play at all. So that was kind of a curious situation there.
Well, and recently, with this new kind of lack of stars playing in the preseason, we've seen a lot worse, first, second games for teams too. I remember you mentioned the Packers and Bears.
Right.
It's first game of the season this
year.
It was not a good game.
No,
nobody was ready.
Sluggish. Yeah. They're just sloppy. You don't have the rhythm of playing in a game, right? I don't care what sport it is. There's a difference between practice speed and game speed, right? You're going up against live competition as opposed to going up against your own teammates who you see every single day. It's completely different. You cannot duplicate it. I don't care how crazy your practices are or what you do. It's just not the same.
No, it's not the same. And I guess we'll probably see an increase in maybe team scrimmages. Like, I went to a Rams-Chargers one last year where Phillip Rivers was playing against the Rams defense, and Jared Goff was playing against Chargers defense, which is better than guys you kind of know their tendencies and stuff like that in practice and training camp. So maybe we'll see an increase in that, and that could help out the situation. But yeah, I think it's going to kind of force guys to have to play at least like one game in this preseason. Because if you're not playing any, and you're going out in the beginning of the season, a lot of times like those first couple games end up kind of screwing you in the playoffs, or screwing you out of the playoffs in the end. I remember the Cardinals a couple times. Many years ago, in the beginnings of the Arians Palmer era.
Last time they were relevant.
Yeah. I remember a couple of years they either didn't make the playoffs or had a worse seed because they had lost a couple of those earlier games in the season. And so those games are just as important as Week 16, Week 14, Week 10. So it all counts, and now potentially we're going to have an added game. And I want to transition to that because I think that's at least the fans see that as the biggest deal in this whole thing, that we're going to see one more week of football. We're going to have a Week 18, and then of course we'll have the added playoff, added playoff team, which will just increase play overall. But this extra game, the one thing I questioned was, well, now unless they have, it's impossible to have this. You're going to have one team with 9 home games, one team with 8 road games.
Right.
And so, there's going to be a little, it's not going to be necessarily fair. Let's say one team got to play less road games than another one, there's going to be a lot of complaints there, even if there's that chance of that extra playoff spot. What do you think about this whole extra game?
Right.
Or if you have any other concerns or positive stuff about it?
Yeah, no, the extra game, I tend to lean with what the players say, because they're the ones on the field risking their bodies, and we know how physical of a sport the NFL is, and I think it's not even close. The majority of NFL players are not on board with bringing an extra game to the table, even though owners are trying to spruce it up by raising salaries, and obviously players are going to be paid for that extra game. It doesn't seem to be enough to outweigh the potential injury threat. Or here's another thing, right? When you get to week 16, week 17, I don't care if you're a practice squad player or if you're a starter. Like, your body is going to be worn down, right? You've had a physical nature, and you've been training and weightlifting and then playing games on Sunday. Many players say it takes 5 days just to recover from a game, right? And we always talk about player safety. I know I'm kind of going off a little bit, but we talk about player safety, and then yet there's still Thursday night games every week. So when players say it takes them 5 days to recover from one game, and then every week we have a Thursday night game where players only get 3 days to recover, that doesn't seem real safe to me, right? But yet the NFL seems to love it because at the end of the day, they're making money.
And those games are always some of the most poor, there's a lot of mistakes. Yeah, poor execution in those games usually. Now, for fans, we've got some crazy Thursday night games, but when you realize that these guys are banged up, it's not as, it'd be like watching a UFC fight where both guys are coming in banged up. You're like, oh, I mean, this is
right. You want guys at full strength, as healthy as possible.
And football players aren't going to be 100% healthy really going into any game.
I mean, listen, after week 1, right, you're going to be banged up.
So you imagine week 15, week 17, the playoffs, but we're just talking about, Thursday night football. They've complained a lot, and because of the short week, a lot of times the football isn't the same. And again, not every single team plays on Thursday night. So again, you're looking at that kind of disadvantage for certain teams that have to play on there potentially even twice. I don't know if that exactly happens, but
usually it's once.
I always said this too. You have now we have 18 weeks, but you have 16. You in the past you had 17 weeks. Every team played 16 games. Why doesn't just every single team play on Thursday night at least? Right? You have 32 teams. It literally works out perfect.
I mean, I feel like usually...
And then it's fair. I guess later in the season, a lot of teams would be getting screwed over. But you look at it, and week 17 wouldn't have a Thursday night game, which it already didn't. And you just had every single play. And yes, we would have some terrible matchups more than likely, but football's not...
He's trying to make it fair.
Yeah, he's trying to make it fair.
I know. I actually think you bring up a good point about the home and away. And if they were to add that extra game to make it 17 games, you're right. There would be some teams that would get 9 home games and 8 away games, and vice versa. So that really isn't fair because depending on some home field advantages, the New Orleans Saints, the Seattle Seahawks, the Kansas City Chiefs, that is a true home field advantage, right? We're not talking about the LA Chargers playing at the StubHub Center, where most away teams bring more fans than the Chargers do.
Really, the Chargers play anywhere.
All right. I was trying to not go that hard, but okay. But basically, what we're trying to say is, right, home field advantage is a thing in the NFL, and when a team gets an extra home game, that is something to think about. Like the Jacksonville Jaguars this upcoming season, they have an agreement where they every year play in London, right? They have a big following in London. This year, the Jaguars are playing 2 games in London. They're both home games, so the Jacksonville Jaguars fans who live in Jacksonville, they're getting kind of cut out of 2 games.
Well, you know what else
unless you want to travel to London.
That's interesting you brought that up too, because I was thinking about that too, and I'm like, can you look at it? You can only have one bye either before this trip or after this trip. So think about the disadvantage the Jaguars are going to have in at least one of these games.
So I haven't read this yet in this new proposed deal, but in other reports in weeks past, I've heard that if they were going to transition to 17 games, adding an extra game, that they would add a second bye.
Well, okay, and I didn't see that.
I know, and I didn't say that, but I've heard that they would add a second bye.
That would be better.
But here's the thing. The Jaguars, if you think about it, they play like 2 consecutive home games, or in London. Actually, so they would play in London 1 week, and then in London the next week, and then coming home back to the States, they would get that bye week to rest and recover.
Tough, though. Well, yeah, but if what are you going to fly over to London on Monday, miss out on the whole day? You're recovering from jet lag and the time difference on Tuesday, and by the time it's Wednesday, you're finally getting to practice, and you only really get to play. Now, this is a whole different thing because I think the NFL eventually is going to try to add either 2 more teams, maybe 2 teams in London, or
That's never gonna happen.
well, but I'm just saying they're going to try to move a team potentially to London, and I think the Jaguars are unfortunately looking like that. And I'll say this, and I know a lot about the cons because I follow professional wrestling, and they own a new professional wrestling company. They also own a Premier League soccer team. So the cons themselves, I don't think 100% will be opposed to moving to London as well, which is I think why this happens a lot, where they keep staying in London. Because the cons at points over the overall scale of the year, they are over in London and in England specifically a lot. So we don't have any other owners that are associated with the Premier League. So the Jaguars, unfortunately, are going to get screwed in this. But I'm just wondering, I guess in this case you'd have a bye before the London trip, bye after the London trip for Jacksonville. It's the only way you could possibly.
Right, and then there goes their buys for the rest of the season. No. Usually, I would assume throughout the 17 or 18 weeks, the buys would be split up by in week 4, week 5, and then a bye in week 15, kind of spread out. Right, sure. The Jaguars would have to take their buys almost in consecutive weeks, if not through 2 weeks after each other. That burns their buys. So now they're playing 15 weeks of straight football, which that can be taxing on one's body.
Well, and this is what's funny is this issue doesn't even have to do with CBA necessarily. This is just we're just talking about Jaguars. The fact that they added a London game. This isn't necessarily new news, but I'm wondering unless they add that second bye, man, they're screwed one of these weeks.
Right, because it's either going to be the week of them traveling to London or the week of them coming home. They're going to be in trouble. Yeah,
and again, like it's like if you're going to do these things, right? Why not have all the teams do it? We'll have some teams go play in Mexico, some teams.
Right. Well, the NFL is continuing their partnership with Mexico City, but still, that's just for 1 week. The NFL currently, I believe, has 4 or 5 different weeks of games in London right now, so that's a lot more.
Well, yeah, and that's to get teams exactly. It's like if you're going to go to a full scale London kind of movement here, why not just have again? You have every single team play over there at some point in the year, or at least the team is flying somewhere to keep the games. This is never going to happen.
So what the NFL has been doing is over the last 10 years since they've partnered with London to have these games, right? Like every year it's a different team that goes over. So if you're the Cowboys and the Cardinals, for instance, if you went over last year, you're not going to London this year.
But
and
you're probably not going to go over there every single year.
They do go every year because they have a specific agreement with them. And also, I think that's because Jacksonville, as far as a home, being a home state and having home games, they don't bring in the fan base that London does.
True.
London actually London games, generate more revenue than as if the Jacksonville Jaguars were to be playing at home in Florida. So that's kind of interesting right there. And once again, the NFL is all about their bottom line and the bottom dollar, and they see that there's more money to be made with a game played overseas.
No, for sure. And like for example, last year we had 10 teams play outside of the United States. So you would have to add, was that bad math? You'd have to add 11 more games somewhere else, or in London, or in Germany, or maybe Japan, something like that. Somewhere where you're going to extend the the reach here. But I just think again, I guess if you're alternating. Again, the Jaguars, though, unfortunately have to go over there every single year, and the players aren't all the same every year. So it's not like you can just get used to it. So, but there's always going to be unfair. And it's different than baseball. Baseball has a lot of series in the Asian countries. But it's like a week before the whole season starts, and it really, 1-2 games in baseball over in Japan is not equal to 1 game in London in the NFL. It'd be like 2 weeks in baseball over in Japan. Right. That would affect the team. That'd be tough, especially coming back over all that stuff. But let's talk about the playoffs really quickly before we move on to the NFL. The added playoff teams from the AFC and NFC, and now the 1 bye. I personally don't have any problem with this because it just means
an extra playoff game.
It means an extra playoff game, but it also means that more teams will try to make the playoffs because they have a better chance. In baseball, they recently added the wild card teams, the extra wild card teams, and that has increased trades at the deadline and player signings and all that stuff. And baseball has been more fun in September than it ever was, and I think football now will be more fun in December and November than it already was.
Right. Like for instance, last year, if the NFL would have added an extra team to the playoffs, the Rams and the Pittsburgh Steelers both would have made it in.
Now, they both would have lost in the first round for sure.
More than likely.
But we've had years,
would have had games.
but yeah, we've had years where there's like 11-5 teams that don't make the playoffs, and I think that's a good thing that those teams can make the playoffs now, because I don't really think there's 8 teams from a division that realistically are Super Bowl contenders. So adding an extra team, at least one of these years, we're gonna have some awful team. Right. But then again, like what happened with the Cowboys and Eagles last year, with them not necessarily deserving to be in the playoffs.
Right.
Now that conversation kind of leans away. It's like, okay, well, they probably more likely would have been 7 seed anyway, so it's just...
Well, no, but here's the thing, though. It still comes down to, because the Cowboys and the Eagles were in the same division, the division winner automatically gets into the playoffs and gets a home playoff game.
Yeah.
So if they were in the wild card facing off with each other, that would be one thing. But because they were fighting for a division spot, if you win your division, you're automatically in the playoffs no matter what.
Well, what I'm saying though is the Eagles ended up 9-7, correct, last year?
I believe so.
Yeah, and then I think the Rams were 9-7 as well. So looking at it that way,
okay,
with this 7th team,
okay,
there would have been a lot less of, oh, this is BS. Eagles or Cowboys are going to make it. Well, no, because now more than likely 9 and 7 teams are going to make the playoffs a lot. So it does help. I'm just looking at positive.
You know what I think it does also, if you know you're one of the elite teams fighting for that number 1 seed, the only first round bye, maybe you don't rest your players week 17 or the last game of the season like many teams will do, like the Baltimore Ravens did. They rested Lamar Jackson and a plethora of their starters, knowing that they had the number 1 seed locked up. What did they do? They came out in the second round of the playoffs at home against Tennessee and got knocked around, right? Because they basically had 2 weeks off of rest. So maybe because there's only 1 first round bye, teams are going to continue to play their starters a little bit longer to make sure that they secure that seed and to keep their momentum going. So, a lot of things on kind of both ends of the spectrum to kind of talk about and dive into when talking about that extra game. I'm a fan of it from a playoff perspective, adding an extra team into the playoffs. But like I said, as far as adding an extra game to the season, I'm going to side with the players. And as of right now, the players, for the most part, are saying no.
Yeah, which is interesting because a lot of this stuff does seem positive. It does just seem like the major changes are the ones where they're going to have to maybe negotiate something else or something.
I want to say one more thing because I know we have to move on. And there's one thing that I would like to see changed as far as terms go for the NFL. And this is something that I have never been able to wrap my head around. I've looked it up and I haven't been able to find an answer. So there are 53 players on every NFL team, right? There's 32 teams.
I know
53 players. You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
On game day, only 46 players dress, which means 7 players from every team don't dress in uniform and don't play. For whatever reason, right? And it could be if it's an injury concern, if they're not 100% healthy, yes, you don't have to dress them. But it's like, the NFL, like I said, this goes back to the safety rule where the NFL is such a violent game and they talk about safety, right? And you want to have so much depth. You're paying 53 players. Why not put 53 players on the field?
Well,
I don't understand it.
I think you see it in the NBA where you have 15-man rosters and only 12 can play. Right?
It doesn't make sense.
No, and the NHL has 23-man rosters and only 20 can play. Now, the way the lines work in the NHL, it makes a lot of sense why that happens.
Okay.
But the NFL,
I seriously don't get it. Like,
because it's the most violent sport. You're right. That's what
I'm saying. You want to have depth. Like, so say you have 10 offensive linemen that dress for a game, which means you only have 1 backup for each position. Well, guess what? What if you're starting offensive lineman and then your backup offensive lineman goes out? Like, it would be nice to have an extra player, or for whatever reason, for depth, to have 7 extra guys. Whether it's special teams or injury concerns or whatever, I don't understand why, for some reason, every game, 7 guys don't dress for whatever reason, but yet they still get paid. Like, it's not like they get a pay reduction or anything like that. They're not on the practice squad. They don't just practice with the team. They are players on the actual roster that just don't dress up. It doesn't make sense.
No, and like I'm saying too, when you look at the other sports that do this, the NHL, the way you have 4 forwards and 2 defensemen, the way the lineup stacks out with 2 goalies, it makes sense that only 20 players would have to play. You're not going to add 1 extra forward. It doesn't make sense, right? with the NBA, too, a lot of times the 13th, 14th, 15th player is not going to get any minutes. A lot of times the 10th, 11th, 12th player in the NBA is barely playing. So adding those extra players, it's probably good they're not playing. It would hurt their morale. But with football, a lot of times, especially when there's injuries happening, you need that depth. And I mean, at least maybe just do like 3 players, right? Where you have like one backup quarterback, maybe some guys that are a little bit banged up, they don't want to go on IR. Okay,
well, that's the thing. Here's a couple different scenarios, right? Here's one scenario. You have one of your star players, your star receiver, who's like 80% healthy. He's got a hamstring injury. Yeah. He can more than likely play, but you don't know if he's going to make it through 4 quarters of a game, right? It would be nice to have that extra receiver to go in there and spell him and say, hey, you know what? We're going to cut your minutes this game, or we don't have to full go with you because there's a chance that you might not make it through this game. Or if you want to bring in a guy because he's great on special teams or he's a great returner, but that's really all he does. So, yeah, you don't have a big need for him. But if you can dress him, guess what? You can put him out just for returns. Like, it just becomes more complicated because with a 46-man roster, a guy has to be a lot more versatile. And not saying that you don't want guys to be versatile and to be able to do multiple things, but if a guy has a special trait like a Devin Hester, who is strictly good at returning the ball, in some cases, teams have to sit that player because he's not versatile enough to do multiple things, and they can't waste that roster spot on game day with a guy who only does one thing. Sure. So I just, like I said, I've looked this up, I've researched it, and I tried to find an answer, and the NFL has not come up with really any answer, not even a legitimate, or not even a crappy answer as to why 7 players don't dress.
Yeah, or maybe like extend the rosters to like 60 or something
just
like that.
Doesn't make sense.
Like if you're gonna have the 7 players off, just expand the rosters so more guys can play and more guys have a job. All right. Has anybody ever complained about more people having a job?
I don't think so. Really. Well, maybe the owners, because then they're having to give out more money.
That's true. Those are the one guys, but we don't really care about them. So, speaking of high-level people with influential voices saying dumb things. Let's move on to Jared. I'll just say this. You know, we try not to talk about the Astros every single time on this podcast, right? Realistically, we can have the Astros. You're correct. Realistically, every single time we record a show every week, we realistically could add 20 minutes on the Astros, but we decide not to because, you know, I don't want to be mad every single time I show up here to record. Number 2,
I don't want you getting high blood pressure. You're too young for that.
There's bigger stories like that what's been going on with football and a lot of stuff, and we've had the Super Bowl and all that stuff. But this was a little different this last week. We had Commissioner Rob Manfred come out and essentially say that the punishments are more than okay. He essentially is sitting here saying that what the Astros did wasn't that bad. He called the World Series trophy, the trophy that everyone battles tooth and nail, blood, sweat, and tears for, a piece of metal. This is not a piece of metal. You can't see that if you're looking at the main camera, but we use multiple pieces of metal here for our production. None of it is a value of the World Series trophy. It's not even close.
Hey man, this is a nice gift. I paid a lot of money for this.
I paid a lot of money, yeah. But did we blood, sweat, and tears battle it out?
I did. I blood, sweat, and tears for work to pay for this. So no, okay. Basically, what we're saying is Rob Manfred is an idiot.
I didn't think he was going to say that.
And even worse, he then has to obviously come out and have an apology statement, and it was just so weak, right? And it's like, dude, your feet weren't being held to the fire. You didn't have to like just spit this out. It's almost like he just wasn't thinking, and he just decided to blurt this out. Like you just don't say. You can think it in your head, but you are the commissioner of Major League Baseball, right? You are the head honcho, and you come out and say something like that. When you have Mike Trout, who many believe is the best player in all Major League Baseball, who's also very silent in many cases. He's a down-to-earth guy, but he doesn't really come out and kind of share his opinion or his voice on many things. When Mike Trout comes out and talks about what the commissioner said in a negative light and goes against the commissioner, I think that speaks volumes. When LeBron James, one of the most recognizable sports faces in all of sports, period, right? When he comes out and speaks about it and he's not even a baseball player, like that speaks volumes. Yeah. This is more than just the Astros cheating. the commissioner has now compiled that with just bad verbiage, right? And he's adding fuel to the fire when right now you should be doing everything in your power to put that fire out.
What we've seen also the last couple of weeks that we haven't talked about in this podcast too is the Astros apology as well, which connects with this whole Manfred lack of, not an apology, because Rob Manfred doesn't need to apologize for one of the teams cheating, but he kind of just made it overall sound like it wasn't that big of a deal. And he made it sound like, oh, well, teams that win the World Series, it's not a big deal. Like, what are you talking about, man? Like, seriously, how is this guy in control I don't, and the players, this is not just me as a biased Dodger fan sitting here and complaining. Everybody, every single player has come out. Aaron Judge, like you mentioned, Mike Trout, which is the most shocking one of all of them. Of course, the Dodgers have been very vocal. The Astros have, defended themselves, all that stuff, and come up with these ridiculous.
How do you defend yourself?
I mean, now they're making up multiple reasons why Jose Altuve didn't take his shirt off. All this crazy, insane stuff that we can't fit into one podcast has now been, emphasized by the leader of the league's incompetence on the whole issue.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I think what you're going to ask me is probably the same thing I was going to say. So.
It's not actually. This is something that I had thought about, and I haven't really heard this on airwaves or reporters talking about this. I haven't heard you talk about this or tweet about it, and so I wanted to get your opinion on this, because this is coming from a non-baseball fan. I've never played organized baseball. I watch it all the time. I do enjoy it. But I want you to be able to clarify this for me, right? Going back to, 18, whatever, whenever baseball originated, until now, 2020, there's always been, and you've said it, our resident baseball fan, Alex Silva, has said it to me multiple times. I've heard baseball players say it. There are unwritten rules in baseball. And there is, cheating, quote unquote, that happens that is just a part of the game, right? Here's my thing. When you opened up Pandora's box and allowed cheating to happen in the game and be allowed, what did you think was going to happen with the advances in technology? Pretty soon, what we saw with the Astros, eventually someone or some team was going to push the envelope and try to do what the Astros did. And guess what? They succeeded because they won a World Series and they got to keep it. So my question to you is, because I've never been able to wrap my head around this, why are there these unwritten rules and these cheating that is allowed, but that's okay, but yet this, using technology and using cameras is not okay?
Well, here's the thing. It's a very interesting topic to bring up. I actually can answer this in two ways. Two different kind of answers.
Please, I need all the help I can get.
To be honest, there's a lot of unwritten rules in other sports. Like basketball, you have a lot. James Harden travels every play. Technically, that's cheating, right? But he doesn't get caught. But he probably knows what he's doing and realizes that the refs. But in football, there's holding on every single play. Technically, it's cheating. There's gonna be like stuff like that. With baseball, sign stealing, I wouldn't even necessarily consider it as cheating necessarily.
Hold on.
Only because, here's the thing. If you looked at other sports and you heard a coach say, I remember when I played when I was very young, I played organized basketball, right? We had plays called Pepperdine, UCLA, all this stuff. Okay. If you were on the court and you heard the opposing coach yell a play name that you knew what it was.
But how did you know that it's...
This, you guys need to be right here.
Hold on. How do you know that they're running the same play? They could call their UCLA.
True. And that's why in baseball, over time, players have mixed up signs. A lot of times you'll see catchers with guys on second base hitting their shoulder pad. The baseball today, Jonathan Lucroy, who has played for the A's and Angels recently, so he's played the Astros a lot in the last couple of years, said that anytime he played the Astros, it was a different sign every single time. Every single bat.
Every at-bat?
Every at-bat, he was switching signs because he knew they were cheating.
Really?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So the good players, the good catchers, and the good pitchers figure this stuff out, and they know what to do. What I'm saying is, here's the bigger problem. This is the second part of this. You bring up a good point. They opened up Pandora's box. They cheated. What happened when the guys took steroids? Because that was cheating too. They got punished a lot, and now none of them are making the Hall of Fame. And now forever they're going to tell their kid, and I have to explain to their kids, why didn't you make the Hall of Fame, Dad? Your stats are better than, well, because they cheated, right? The Astros, it's not the same case. And what was the penalty? $5 million fine, which is the most under CBA. That's all the MLB could do.
That better change the next time.
100%. Oh, you know that all the other teams are going to be like, it needs to be $100 million.
Make it $100 million.
Yeah, hot dog sales shouldn't make it up in a couple games. So $5 million, 4 draft picks, essentially in the next 2 years.
Ooh. And
you fire GM and head coach. I saw someone say this on Twitter. If you told every single team in the MLB that they'd win a World Series if
they do it in RB.
If they fired their manager after the season, if they fired the general manager after the season, if they took away 2 draft picks for the next 2 years, and if they had $5 million fine, they would do it every single time.
I'd give baseball $10 million and say I'm winning the next 2 years. I mean, seriously, no. Here's the thing, right? And that's where my point goes to. Major League Baseball needs to take away the championship.
This is why we turned it all the way back to Rob Manfred. Your questioning of the whole scandal itself, when you look at it, this is why Rob Manfred needed to be more strict on his punishment. The fine, that's all you can do. I understand that, whatever. But maybe fine him $5 million for the next 9 years as well. And then it adds up to $50 million. Every single year, $5 million taken out of their team's paycheck. Whatever, maybe you can do that. That's in the future, we can't even talk about that. But, hey, take away more draft picks. How about they don't get the draft at all in one draft, right? You can do 40 picks. Nope, you guys are out of this draft. You have to figure out some way. International signing pool, they have the minimum amount to sign guys. You can't go out and sign the Yasiel Puig. You can't go out and sign all these other guys, right? Jose Altuve, for example, was not drafted. He was picked up international pool. And then, of course, take away the World Series trophy. That's a given. I don't even know why they haven't done that yet. And a postseason ban. You do that, all of that, right? And there's much more you can do. Oh, there's nobody's going to want to cheat again. Because if you can't set, your teams aren't going to trade with you because players are going to want to go to your team. People are not going to sign free agents. You're not going to be able to draft. Your farm system's going to be terrible. Nobody wants that because then you're rebuilding for 15, 20 years, like we've seen teams do. So I think the question you're asking me, I think it actually should be asked to Rob Manfred, and he should have to explain why he didn't punish these teams worse, because this is a known thing and there's the chance that this kind of cheating was going to come out. One more thing too, the year before the Astros apparently did this in 2017, the MLB did pass out a memo explaining to teams that now that we have replay and all this other stuff, you guys can't cheat with the electronic. Like, you can't use the electronics for any other thing besides.
So they basically got the memo and
said,
wiped their ass with it.
100%. That's actually what happened. And here's the other thing too. Another thing, I think we want to, we're talking about punishments and stuff like that, and I want a discussion on this, but we don't really have to. Rob Manfred also slipped in his second interview, his apology interview, and explained that the Astros cheated after 2017, which wasn't the original. He slipped up. He slipped up and said that they cheated, which wasn't, and all the Astros players and AJ Hinch have not, they go, their voices stutter and they don't know what to say. Now the commissioner has called them out, and there's still no extra punishment for anything they did, even though the MLB knew that they cheated.
See, I think what we're talking about and what the path we're trying to get on right now is preventing this from happening again.
Yeah.
Obviously, what happened. For right now, the Astros are still World Series champions. It's not getting taken away. The Dodgers and the Yankees basically got cheated out of the World Series. That can't be taken away. What can be done is preventative measures to make sure that other teams don't do this. And like you just said very clearly, as of right now, the guidelines and the rules that are in place, you're right. If I'm an organization, I'm saying, hey, you know what? If that means that we win a World Series and we etch our names into MLB history, you know what? Hey, coach, this is your last year with the team. You're going out with bet.
Hey, I say this, right? We got cheated out of the World Series, Yankees, Dodgers. Let's put $10 million in the pool and let's go play World Series.
Seriously, right? Because like a $5 million fine, the loss of your manager, and players not being suspended or having any repercussions at all. That doesn't sound too bad to me if your end prize is winning the World Series. The piece of metal that the commissioner supposedly talks about. I do want to mention one thing, and you're not going to get off the hook for this, and you're going to have to explain this to me.
Okay.
You mentioned in your argument after I asked you the previous question, you said that sign stealing is not cheating. And listen to what you just said.
Okay.
Stealing, which if you look that up in the dictionary, can be made out to cheating. So you said in one sentence that sign stealing is not cheating. I'm sorry, how is stealing not cheating? Tell me, please.
It's a good point. It's okay. Well, what I'm saying is, this type of cheating that Jared wants to call it happens in almost every other sport, or at least can happen. Again, like it's the same with a linebacker calling out an offensive play, right?
That's called great film study.
Well, that's true. I know exactly, but baseball, and it's like when I played Little League, they told me, man on second, switch up the signs. Like they're teaching it at a young level. This is just the way the game works. You have to switch up. You have to be a smart baseball player. You have to switch up the signs.
Okay.
And the pitcher needs to understand this. And a lot of times, the catcher gets hit in the face with baseball because they just signs get crossed. We've seen this before. Right, or a ball goes way past and hits an umpire or something like that, and you wonder what happened. I'm just saying that it's been a part of the game so long that it's just
does it make it right though?
No,
because it doesn't matter that it's been.
Personally, can I say this because I've said this is not cheating. I personally didn't want when I played baseball on second base. I did not want to steal signs. I just thought let's play baseball. It's not. I don't want. I also.
So you were trying to play it like organically. You wanted to play just head up and best man win.
Because as a catcher, I played for catcher up until sophomore year of high school. Pretty much from when I was a little kid. I hated having the chance to sign.
So you were trying to not be the smart dude, right? Okay.
It's so stupid, but it's like at least I can say personally, I didn't steal signs. It was definitely
you can rest easy at night, and
of course I rest a lot easier than these Astros players for sure. Okay. Speaking of resting easy, this is the last topic we'll talk about, and then we're going to end the podcast. And I think this is the one that the fans are most interested in. So Rob Manfred also in all these press conferences came out and said that there's going to be punishment if these guys get hit or injured intentionally, right? Just adding fuel to the fire of like, so we're going to get punished for essentially this vigilante justice that we now have to do because you guys didn't.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that we will still see this? Do you think we'll still see violence?
Listen.
Yeah.
If you're, I don't know, Clayton Kershaw, it doesn't matter. If you're management, I'm going up to my pitcher and I'm saying, hey, I'll pay your fine. I don't care what you get suspended for a game. I got you. You go do what you got to do, right? And let the Astros know that, hey, you know what? Every game this season, you guys are going to be picked on for what you did.
Yeah.
It's just as simple as that.
I mean,
I'm going up to players and I'm saying, hey, if you happen to just slip one right by a guy's head, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it go.
And here's the other thing. We got to be smart about it. This is strategy. You do this too. You have a guy that's got an ailing shoulder, right? You go, instead of putting you on the IL, just throw at this. Throw at the Astros. Go play the Astros next week. Just throw it in. You get spread 15 games. There's the DL stick right there. Right?
Yeah.
And we're going to have a strategy, though.
That's true. So, before we wrap up, Stephen A. Smith, who is on First Take on ESPN, obviously very well-known reporter, he came out today and actually had a different take on this. And he said he doesn't feel that any person or team should actually try to harm any of the Astros players. He said that his way of getting back at the players, the Astros specifically, would be to simply just like ghost them. You don't shake their hands before games or after games. You don't talk to them. You get a base hit and you get on first base. You're not, dabbing it up with the first baseman and talking to them and all that stuff, asking how the wife is or whatever the hell you talk about when you get on first base. You pretend like that first baseman isn't even there, right? You turn your backs to them when you're doing opening ceremonies and all that stuff. I mean, you literally just pretend like the Astros aren't even there. And that's,
I like it.
It's interesting to take, right? But I think what he was ultimately trying to say was he was trying to get away from the violence of throwing at a hitter and potentially injuring them and saying, go with their psyche, go with their hearts, make them feel like they're miniature, make them feel like they're invisible, and that's how you can really get at them.
Yeah, obviously, I don't want to see Carlos Correa get hit in the face with a baseball and be out for the season and have this concussion and all that stuff. But gets hit in the ass with a baseball, I'm not going to care. Gets hit in the thigh, gets hit in the back, gets hit in the elbow. Like, no, man.
Shake it off, man.
You need to pay
Shake
for
it off.
Like, you need to pay for also going after my boy Cody Bellinger, too. This past week, which we're not going to get into. We don't have time. And it's just going to piss me off so much if we start that. But yeah, Stephen A has a good point, because I think, live, when you see baseball games, it does happen a lot. There's some camaraderie between the players.
Right.
And it makes the game more fun. And baseball, being, out of the major four sports, probably the most boring. There's less action going on than any other sport.
Some have said it's like watching paint dry.
Yeah, that's true. I don't agree with that. But the players also are not just sitting there like, oh, excited about there's sometimes they'll be a little bored. Hey, there's Jose Altuve on second base. I'm gonna talk to him. He's a fun guy. There's Carlos Correa. Let me see how he's doing. He just married his wife. All that stuff. There's stuff. But yeah, you're right. We see you go to the major league, for example, right? And we see the players warming up. A lot of times they'll go out in center field and shake each other's hands, right? We'll see that. Hey, Stephen A has a good point. I already think this is not going to happen that much, but I don't think there's going to be all that. On second base, I think there's more, like our boy Alex was saying, I think there's a better chance of you getting spikes to the stomach than there is a guy talking to you about your family on second base if you play for the Houston Astros. So it's going to be really, really interesting. If I had to put a bet on it, it's going to be the big brawl is going to happen against the Yankees. Because the Yankees play the Astros.
Do we know when that matchup is? Is that early in this? I hope it's early in the
season.
season.
Talk about something for another minute, and I will bring this up for you.
I would love for that to be early in the season. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the Astros open up the season in Anaheim, which is actually in our backyard.
They open up the season against the Angels at home. Then they travel to Oakland. The Angels' home opener is against the Astros.
Oh, okay.
And there
we might have to get together.
There are 3,000 at least Dodger fans coming to this game.
That's right. There's that's
Cantone
right.
294. Look them up on Instagram. They have blue check. They are probably the best traveling fan group in the MLB. They are traveling away from LA.
I just got the 405. They're not going far.
Well, they're not going with the Dodger stuff. They are going to the Angel game on April 3rd, Friday night.
Oh, that's going to be awesome. I hope that's a nationally televised game, too. Right?
It is too.
Here's another thing. I hope that the Astros get a lot of nationally televised games so that people who maybe aren't familiar with baseball or don't follow baseball as much, they can actually see these games and see the boos, see the reactions that these Astros players are getting, because this is, we don't have to sit here and say this to most people, but for some, this is a big deal, right? And like I said, I was trying to wrap my head around what's cheating, versus what's not cheating in Major League Baseball, but clearly what the Astros did was cheating. It no doubt helped them win a World Series. And one thing that we didn't mention, and I don't know if we mentioned this yet, which could be the most important thing of them all, this whole cheating scandal affected players' lives and their money. Players got fired, players lost contracts and lost money because at the time they didn't perform well against the Astros when we all thought the Astros were just elite. And since then, guys were sent down to the minor leagues and then cut. And guys are now on the couch or have had to find other careers because of what this cheating scandal has done. So I don't think that's something that many people have talked about in depth, but I think that's something that's very important that we bring up, that this is more than just the Houston Astros winning a piece of metal. This is the fact that they have affected players' lives and their money, and I think that's something that needs to be said.
It's the worst thing that's come out of all this. Absolutely the worst thing. That the guys have lost jobs, and good for Mike Bolsinger too. Former Dodgers player, I remember him playing for us. He actually had an ERA in the twos at one point for us. Real positive pitcher. He's suing the Astros. He just added the general manager, the owner, Jim Crane.
Really?
Probably after Jim Crane's comments of that.
Wow. Okay.
The cheating didn't affect the play on the field, which is just. I mean, that guy has like $1 billion, and he said something that dumb.
Then go dig yourself $1 billion hole and put yourself in it.
Yes,
that's
exactly. Okay, so real quick before we end this podcast, the Yankees and Astros play 7 games this season. They play in Houston May 16th to 18th.
So relatively early.
Relatively early, and then they play in New York September 21st, September 24th. Right
They're
before
gonna
the
be
playoffs
okay.
start.
Okay,
That's
listen,
where it's happening.
Listen, that's where it's gonna happen.
Book your flights.
If you're in New York, if you're a police officer, undercover, I don't care. You're getting called in for that game. There's gonna be extra security. Wherever the Astros are staying at their hotel in New York, they ain't gonna get any sleep that night. There's gonna be fire alarms pulled. It's gonna be a madhouse. I cannot wait for that.
I'll say this. So that's in New York, September 21st. I'm trying to figure. I don't know what days those are. But my brother's gonna be playing college football on the East Coast. I might make a trip out to
There you go,
down
man.
the East
There you
Coast.
go.
For
That
that
might be
week,
one of the
we'll
guys
watch
pulling
that.
the fire alarm at 3 a.m. in the morning. You never know.
I got places I can stay in New York City. I got homies I can stay with
Okay.
for free.
All right.
So
All right.
we yeah, it'll be interesting. But no, all joking aside, this is a crazy scandal, and it's definitely put a scar on baseball to start this season. And normally we'd be talking about who's contenders, who's pretenders, all that stuff. But right now we've been talking about the Astros a lot, and it's been all negative. So hopefully, when games start, I believe it's next week. Games are going to start finally for spring training. Then we get kind of back to baseball, right? And back to, hey, let's see who's good. Let's see all the prospects that can make it, all that stuff. But I'm totally ready for guys getting handed to. I'm down for that. That's going to be good.
And that's how we're ending the podcast.
That's how we're ending the podcast.
Nick can't wait for guys to get
Yes.
hit. So that's it for today's show. We just wrapped up by talking about the scandal with the Astros and everything evolving around that. And we began the show talking about the NFL with the owners agreeing on a new collective bargaining agreement, and now it's in the players' court to basically agree or not agree to that. And if they do, then we will have the next 10 years of uninterrupted football. If the players do not agree, there is a greater chance that there could be a strike after the 2020 season, which would mean no football, which would mean no fun for anybody. Hopefully we don't get to that point.
And that was a good discussion as well. If you thought our baseball discussion was, you jumped in late, that discussion might have been better or equal to what we just talked about. So this was a good podcast.
Definitely. But for today's show, I'm Jared Smith.
I'm Nick Dino.
This has been the Cover 2 Podcast. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys next week. Check us out on Facebook, and then after tomorrow, we will be on YouTube.
Yes.
See you guys.